Hey, it's Jose Galison. You're watching No Way Jose. You can find me on the No Way Jose YouTube channel, also on all the major audio podcatchers and Odyssey as well. Credit to Justin Campbell at jcamp1521 for the intro. My guest today is Sal the Agorist. We're continuing the live reading of New Libertarian Manifesto. If you're watching this on the 3rd, it's a live stream. It'll only be available the day of, and then I'll put it up public roughly about a week or so from now. But yeah, so if you want to have access to the episodes in the meantime, you need to be a patron. It's patreon.com, just No Way Jose 2020. Lowest level is $2. It gets you access to that. Highest level is $20, and they'll give you the read off as a sponsor. There's other levels in between. You can check out the Patreon if you are interested in that. Sponsors, I have C. McRae of the Whiskey and Tea podcast, Jacob Winograd of the Daniel 3 podcast, where there's a lot of biblical anarchy content. Newer one, Brandon Smith. His Twitter is @_2D System. He has 2D System on YouTube and Rumble, and he also has music on Spotify and other streaming platforms as 2D System. Like I said, we're doing the live reading series of New Libertarian Manifesto. I've already knocked out an Agorist Primer series. If you want to go check that out. If you're on YouTube, there's a playlist for it. Anywhere else, you have to hunt down the episodes individually. Next week, I'll be having on Tommy Salmons of Year Zero, where we'll be covering Valterine de Claire's essay in Anarchist Handbook, or The Anarchist Handbook. I'll be continuing that series. Right now, if you're on the 3rd, Tower Gang is doing a Florida LP convention recap. And then next week, that'll be, I guess, the 9th, likely. We have Lou Perez, the comedian, on there. As always, go check out TopLobsta, toplobsta.com. Use Jose at checkout for 10% off. All right, let's get into it. Hey, what's up, man?
What up?
What's up?
How are you, brother?
Doing all right. Yeah, this is the first time I think we talked right after the quote unquote debate. So I guess we don't really have to cover that much. It's funny. I've been getting a lot of flack for that. A lot of people are like giving me shit for not being an agorist or whatever.
Why? What happened?
I don't know. A lot of people were giving me shit for that, which I mean, like, okay, whatever. We have some disagreements in our argumentation, which whatever.
I thought people would be yelling at me, but I haven't got any sort of negative feedback.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was good, but it was funny. Some of the thing, and I got some people claiming that it was like that that I marketed as a debate, and I was like, I was very clear as much as I could that I was trying to go for a conversation. I guess some people were like, well, the title was agorism versus politics.
People are never fucking happy. I mean, dude, we always do it again. I mean, I don't care. Like I had fun. I mean, I enjoy talking about that sort of stuff. You know.
No, it's fun. Yeah, go get Dave again. We'll do it. We're doing it again.
Yeah.
No, it was fun. But yeah, I guess some of the more the flack was coming in, so I just thought it was kind of funny.
Fuck them.
Yeah, no, I don't care. I just thought it was funny. But we're a little bit of time crunch. You have a heart out today, so I guess we'll go ahead and get into it. We're on chapter 4. We have chapter 5 after this. Is a short one, so next week's episode will probably be pretty short. We'll try and knock out chapter 4 today. And I'm still not entirely sure if I want to do the critiques, because that's a good chunk and there's a lot of good stuff in there. But I don't know.
That would probably not be a bad idea either, to be honest with you. Then we could hit some of the common responses and how the Agorist would respond to it. It's up to you, though.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that will translate, but I may just do it. I'm leaning towards doing it. I just was unsure.
Yeah, let's do it. Hell yeah, I'm down.
Well, all right, cool. Let's go ahead and get into it. Chapter 4, Revolution, Our Strategy. And as always, if you have anything to say, feel free to cut me off, whatever.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Our condition has been analyzed, our goal perceived, the mechanism has been spelled out, and a set of pathways have been mapped out. Should we simply go counter-economic ourselves, educate ourselves in libertarianism, and inform others by word and deed, we shall reach our libertarian society, which I do want to point out that was a big it's kind of works out that we can kind of we're going over this, and a lot of that stuff came up in the debate. One of the common thing people were brought up was the whole idea of that, like what am I trying to say, that that like we don't want to message. It's like that's a common misconception. Like that's not what we're saying, and I don't think that's what you're saying either. Like,
No,
yeah,
not at
but
all.
so he even just says right there that inform others by word and deed. He's saying that that's like something we should do. Like it's not something he's saying we shouldn't do at all. So
But notice how he includes by deed, right? Like
yes.
so, like we have to, and he says, should we simply go counter economic ourselves? In other words, like should lead by example, show people how to do this vis-a-vis example, and that's what I try. That's what I know. That's what you and other agorists try to do, and hopefully, it's working.
Yes. Indeed, this is sufficient for most people and enough to be expected. No new libertarian should ever berate libertarian and counter economics for not doing more. Counter economists, I said that wrong. They are agorists and will get there in their own time, which that's actually a key point, I think. But go ahead.
That's really, really key right there. And I really try to not like you're less agorist than this guy, or I'm more agorist than you. I hate like that. I hate getting into that shit. And every time I sense a conversation going down that road, these two lines like jump out in my head. And it's like Konkin is like the ghost of Konkin is like, no, lay off of them. Like they'll get there eventually,
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to lambast Vin Armani, but it's been a story. I don't know if you know James Gentleman. If you've been on his show, actually, I do.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is what necessarily made him not, but it did kind of, I guess probably sort of maybe push him away a little bit. Like I know he's like Vin went on his show and then shortly after wrote an article clearly like 100% was about James, and it was about not being an armchair agorist, and he was kind of lambasting him. And that is one thing. It's like I always try to emphasize that to not do this like binary thinking of either you're all in or you're all out. Like the whole idea of agorism is like you do what you can based on your subjective values,
And we have no idea what James is doing behind the scenes. Like this guy could be running guns to Ukraine for all we know. You know what I mean? Who the hell are we to tell him what he's doing? How do you know what I mean? It's sort of silly to me, but I will say you can't separate agorism from action. So if you're not actually engaging in counter economics, it's hard to make the case that you're engaging in agorism, right? So if you're not acting on counter economics, you're probably not doing it. But with that being said, nobody has a claim to the title of agorism. No one has a right to say I'm more agorist than you. Like it's a spectrum, and like some people might be further down that line than others, and that's completely fine.
Yeah, and even then, I think it's very much to some extent a mindset. So it's about doing what you can where you can. I think in that episode, if I recall correctly, James actually said that he doesn't really engage as much. But I don't know what his current situation was at the time. So it may have been one of those things where he didn't really have that many places where he could at that moment in time or whatever. But you have that mindset, and the idea is that you're trying to go that way. It's to also. But
I can remember a couple articles where Konkin was speaking about this, and he would say something like, it's in Anti-Politics. It's like this little pamphlet that he published, and it's like he was responding to his critics, and like they were like, well, what are you doing, for libertarianism? He's like listing all the stuff that he engages in, and a lot of it is like publishing the New Libertarian Journal, New Libertarian Notes. So it's like Konkin also was like he also included like spreading the message as a form of agorism, you know what I mean? But it's like at the end of the day, I do think you have to engage in the black and gray markets to some extent, in some way, and we all do, by the way.
Exactly. That was kind of my point I was driving at before. It's even just a mindset of it's more just realizing that you are, and then trying to engage with that more. Even these simple agorists, though, may wish to contribute to entrepreneurs who specialize in accelerating the movement towards the agorist society and away from statism, and others perceiving rising inflation heading toward economic collapse or the gathering clouds of war will want something done about it. Finally,
sounds familiar, huh?
Yeah. Finally, the counterattacks of the state that subvert the agorist society and lure libertarians into false paths can be combated. These tasks define the field for the new libertarian activists. Again, for those who wish only to live their lives as freely as possible and associate with others like-minded, counter-economic libertarianism is sufficient. No more is needed. For those, however, who want to support in whatever ways they can those heroic entrepreneurs who specialize in recruiting for the Agora, deal with state-caused catastrophes, and combat status within and without, a guide is needed to select out those who are doing something worthwhile from those who are spinning their wheels and those who are actually counterproductive, i.e. counter-revolutionary. And for those,
the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus. Go ahead.
And for those, like this author, who burn for liberty and wish to devote themselves to that life's work, a strategy is essential. What follows then is a new libertarian strategy. A little aside, I guess maybe it does kind of tie into it. Someone was saying something, actually, I think it was in relation to secession, so it's not the best example because I know that's like kind of a touchy area for Agorist, but someone was giving the Mises Caucus shit like, oh, well, this is a good way to get you branded as a terrorist organization. And I joked, I was like, well, okay, hit me up when you guys are officially branded terrorist organization. I may just join. But it's like, it is kind of like, it sounds like you're like counter to agorism, but it's like, well, that point, you're literally just a gray or black market organization because you're not going to be able to engage in it. So it's like, okay, hit me up when you guys get there. Like, if you guys accelerate to the point to where you implode, I'm all for it.
Like, come on, dude. Like we've been on the domestic terrorist watch list now for years. Get with the game here. Come on.
Yeah. Which is kind of my point. I went on I think it was Aaron's podcast, A Time on Earth or whatever, forever ago. And that was my point. That was like, if they can go that hard, sure, great. But at that point, it's kind of like, yeah, they're just going to implode. But then whatever, they join us in the Agora.
Right, exactly.
Which I guess that's one way to do it. They went too hard and they found that line and they just, they became, what we want them to be. All right. The new libertarian activists must keep in mind that actual defense against the state is impossible until the counter economy has generated syndicates of protection against agencies sufficiently large to defend against the remnant of the state. This will occur only at the phase transition between the third and fourth steps leading back from our statism to agorism. Each step from statism to agorism requires a different strategy. Tactics will differ even within each step. There are some rules that will apply in all stages. Under all circumstances, one recruits and educates. Given typically confused individual acquaintances who consider a counter-economic act, encourage them to do it. If they are intelligent enough and not likely to turn on you, explain risks involved and return expected. Most of all, educate them by your example to the extent you can let them know. I like that bit. If you didn't add that one or not, but
no.
All right. Yeah, we kind of already hammered that a little bit.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, no, that's kind of the point we're getting at, is to kind of the focus is the example. And it's not to say the Libertarian Party members don't do that, but I feel like the priorities are flipped a little bit. So
yeah, and I really hope that people see like 3D printer go burr and they think to themselves like, oh shit, maybe I could find some sort of entrepreneurial venture like that. And I hope that it really does like encourage people to sort of engage in disruptive entrepreneurship in some way.
Mm-hmm. All library libertarians, which I love that expression. That was something I think we talked about earlier at some point. I was trying to get at. I forgot that expression to use because there are libertarians that, like, yeah, maybe they engage into it to some extent, but don't really do it. But they're more like in the theory. And don't get me wrong, I love theory. Like, most of my show is theory, but to some extent, you gotta fucking do something.
Well, what gets me, and Conkin's really gonna hit a home run here, but like we get accused of because agorism stresses consistency, we get accused of sort of like living in Ancapistan in your head and whatnot. But it's really what Conkin's calling library libertarians that do that, whereas we are the only ones who are actually out in the field battling the state in any meaningful sense of the term.
Yeah, which I mean, I guess because the people that, because yeah, I guess in their head they would say, well, they're doing the politics route, they're trying to make that happen, but it's like to us, it's kind of like, well, you're not. What are you really doing? Like, what is? I don't know.
That one's contrary to the theory, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, and I know we have different argumentations. I tend to argue more the practical route. You seem to focus more. You have a different focus, but yeah. So in my head, it's more like I don't really see, like, yeah, you may get a gain, but if you in some regard, but if you stretch that out on the long run, it's kind of like, well, you're not really.
Right, like, exactly.
Like, that's why I like to use a gambling example. It's like you're a person with a gamble. you're a person with a gambling addiction that like you got a jackpot like a year ago, and that's what you hold on to forever, you know.
Right. But they didn't get a jackpot. It's like they just got a couple coins out of the machine like 10 years ago, and they've been hooked ever since.
All right, all library libertarians, you know, those who profess some theoretical variant of libertarianism but eschew its practice should be encouraged to practice what they preach. Scorn their inaction, practice or praise their first halting steps towards counter economics. Which, once again, that was a big point. We already kind of touched on it. Praise their first halting steps towards counter economics. That's one thing I don't. And this is one of my biggest critiques of agorism is agorists, because I do think a lot of agorists do fall into this trap of becoming what the parody of what they call us to be, where we're kind of this toxic, you know, like, oh, you know, or kind of shitty because you're not engaging in counter economics to the fullest extent you can or whatever, which I'd say there's a good portion of that's not the case. I guess it's always that like minority that kind of makes you look bad. But yeah, the idea.
but look what Conkin says. Like, says scorn their inaction. So it's like, in a sense, we are supposed to like, what are you guys doing? Like, you're just wasting time. Like, you're treading water. You're running in circles. That's what I try to tell like the LP people and stuff like that. I don't think it works. I don't think I've gotten through to them, but you know, I do try to scorn their inaction.
That's why I focus on the second part. Praise their first halting steps, because
you're much more diplomatic.
Yeah, well, I mean, don't get me wrong. There is something to be said about the scorning. I do think that's a point that should be brought up. But diplomacy comes in play. If you're talking to someone who's willing to accept that critique, sure. But because you critique someone, and often unless they're prepared for that critique, you are likely to turn them away. So
yeah. And I do agree about like praising their first steps towards counter economics. That's what I tried doing with the Paleos a few months ago. Like when Tho and those guys started to make some accolades, like some sort of like, they started to extend an olive branch to Agorists, and I was like, yeah, all right, you know, like, hey, like if you see them, they're promoting cryptocurrency now and stuff like that. So it's when we see them do that, it is really important that we're like, yeah, like encourage them, retweet them, and like stuff like that, because you want to sort of egg that on. You want to sort of encourage that line of thinking.
Exactly. Interact with them more and more as trust grows with their competence and experience. Those already in counter economics whom you meet can be let in on the libertarian philosophy that you hold, that mysterious belief you possess that keeps you so happy and free of guilt. Drop it nonchalantly if they feign lack of interest. Wax enthusiastic as they grow more curious and eager to learn. Basically, this portion right here is how to win friends and influence people, which I think anyone should read, especially libertarians and agorists, because I mean that's just libertarians in general. It's a good one. For us autists, it's a good autistic breakdown of how to interact with people.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. No, it really is great. It is a good way. I mean, it's mostly, if you're someone who's pretty good on a social level, it's mostly stuff that you already know, but especially like we all know the libertarians are super autistic who really aren't good at interacting with people. It literally is an autistic breakdown of how to properly interact with people to get them to do what you want, but in a certain way. And a lot of this is kind of what he's getting at, is that, you know, like to encourage their behavior in certain ways. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be manipulative. It's just a good way to interact with people in general. All right. Sell agorism by example and argument. Control and program your emotional reactions to exhibit hostility at statism and deviationism, and to exhibit enthusiasm and joy at agorist acts and estate setbacks. I guess I will say I do kind of disagree a little bit in maybe the way he frames it, because the hostility should be measured. And it depends on who you're working with. But that's how to win friends and influence people, because when you do put someone off, it's a good way to throw them away from you. But it depends. There are certain people that it's okay to just throw them away, like, and you know what I mean? But
I think what he's talking about here is like he will, like, in other words, program yourself so that when you see like the road work being done, like you're like, oh, fuck these people, like what's going on here? He wants you to automatically have that reaction, like when you see any sort of state action whatsoever, just to be turned off, negative, be opposed to it immediately. We just on seeing it, and then on the other side of the spectrum, like to notice agorism and underground economic activity, and to see the benefits of it, to see what Per Bylan calls the unseen or the unrealized, and to notice it, take note of it, and like to sort of train yourself to like immediately like identify it, so that when you get to that point, the people around you who you spend your time with, that's sort of inevitable that it will rub off on them as well.
Yeah. All right. Most of these tactics will come with routine, but you can check yourself to polish a few things. Finally, coordinate your activities with other new libertarian activists. At this point, we arrive at the need for group tactics and organization. Many worthy libertarians argue that the market structures of businesses, partnerships, and joint stock companies provide all the organization necessary or desirable, save maybe for personal mating or socializing. In one sense, they are correct in that all structures must be market compatible or be inconsistent with agorism. In another sense, they are guilty of a lack of imagination and a concern for form over substance. In an agorist society, division of labor and self-respect of each worker, capitalist, entrepreneur will probably eliminate the traditional business organization, especially the corporate hierarchy, an imitation of the state and not the market. I do like that, and then it kind of touches on a lot of stuff we touched on with Dave, and I know, I guess Rothbard maybe was a little bit more friendly in some senses, which maybe we'll get into that when we get into the critiques when it comes to like corporate stuff. But I think once you start understanding what Conkin's getting at, in a true free society, such large organizations structured in such a sense would not exist, likely, or slowly wither away.
So like number one, if you get rid of the state, there's no corporations, because corporations exist exclusively by state charter.
Yes.
So that's why agorists are so opposed to corporations. The agorist friendly alternative is the joint stock company. But yeah, you're right. In a truly free society, it's much less vertical. It's much more evenly distributed. It's much more horizontal, because there's more opportunity available for people, for entrepreneurs, right? There will be less wage slavery, so it'll be less structured and hierarchical.
Yes. Most companies will be associations of independent contractors, consultants, and other companies. Many, which I don't want to keep driving this, but that is a big point where people get hung up on, that like one day everything will just be, this like decentralized, association of entrepreneurs. And I get it. It's hard to imagine that. And it's like now, and don't get me wrong, there probably would be some sort of structures that would be set up in some sort of wage type setup, but that would probably be the exception and not the rule in a free society. And that would be something that builds towards. Go ahead.
Look at Uber. And look at Lyft and DoorDash. Like, everybody is becoming an entrepreneur. Everybody's becoming an independent contractor. They're all starting to work for themselves. And like, that is sort of the whole key to a decentralized economy, right? And that's really, I think, what he's getting at here.
Mm-hmm. Many may be just one entrepreneur and all his services, computers, suppliers, and customers. This mode of operation is already around and growing in the freer segments of Western economies. Thus, an association of entrepreneurs of liberty for the purpose of specializing, coordinating, and delivering libertarian activities is no violation of the market and may well be optimal. The traditional name for a banding together of sovereign units for a goal and then disbanding is an alliance. Hence, the basic organization for new libertarian activists is the New Libertarian Alliance. The organization of NLA is simple and should avoid turning into a political organ or even an authoritarian organization. Rather than officers, what are needed are tacticians, local coordinators with competency and tactical planning, and strategists, regional coordinators with competency in strategic thinking. A new libertarian ally does not follow a tactician or strategist, but rather buys their argument and expertise. Anyone offering a better plan can replace the previous planner. Tactics and strategies should be bought and sold by the allies like any other commodity in consistent agorist fashion.
So like what he's saying here is like basically when we do get into the final stages of agorism, we should our strategists, our generals, I guess you could say, in the field. I hate to use these terms like from the military, but those people should be hired on a voluntary basis, and it should all be based on their competency and not based on political favor or who knows who or who's friends with the head of the organization. Like there should be none of that bullshit in the NLA. I think that's Conkling's point here.
Mm-hmm. Even though these labels are borrowed from military history and do correspond to a form of combat, never forget that actual physical confrontation with the state's enforcers must await the market's generation of protection agency syndicates of sufficient strength. All else is premature. Which, go ahead. You something.
So there's a funny story. It was from like the Libertarian Party of like Michigan at their like convention years ago, like 20, 30 years ago. And Carl Hess was there and Rothbard, and I guess there was a group of them who were like, let's fuck this, like let's go take on the government right now. And some of them were like, yeah, let's go. And like Rothbard's like, I'm not going, guys. And they got up, they marched out, they went to some like military base in New Jersey. I don't know if you know this story.
No.
And Rothbard tells this story in one of his lectures, and like he's like giving a speech, Rothbard, and all these people come marching back in like an hour later, and they're all like beat up and bloody, and like they're like disheveled, and Rothbard, and they're like, you should have came and helped us, and you stayed here. We got our asses kicked. We got tear gassed and shit like that. And Rothbard's like, yeah, guys, it's a little premature, don't you think? He's like, I'm with you like in like spirit, but like it's a little premature for action. And I think like you can look it up. I think it's called like the Battle of like Fort Dix or something like that. It's even on Wikipedia.
Yeah. No, a good example of that is like, all right, I guess to preface this is it's like whether something is moral or smart are different things. Like, for example, I know a lot of people like a current thing right now is the Cain Velasquez thing. Like, I don't know if you're aware of that. I don't know all the details of the story, but I think some person diddled his kid or some shit. And like, for one, this was way after the fact. He hunted, like not way, but it wasn't like a heat of the moment thing. He planned this out. Like he hunted the dude down and like went on a high speed chase of the guy. And then ended up, like, I guess, trying to attack him, shot the guy that was with him, I think, which was, like, someone trying to defend him. I'm sure more details will come out. But, like, for me, like, this dude's about to do jail time. He probably won't see his family for a long time. So he did this to protect his family. Like, sure, in my anarchist society, the way I see things, sure, yeah, you could go take care of business. You'd go to a private court. They'd probably likely be like, well, okay, well, I can kind of see where you're coming from. But we don't exist in that paradigm. That probably wasn't the most intelligent thing to do. Like, so
yeah, it's not gonna work out well for him in that case.
Yeah, which
but
I mean,
in spirit, I'm with him.
Yes, exactly. I completely am like, yeah, I get it, but at the same time, I'd like to have those years with my kids personally. Like
if
sure,
like let's be honest, if you're gonna go that route, you need to be more covert. You need to have better operational security, is what we say in agorism.
Yeah, and I don't know, but that for me, the big thing with that was that it was premeditated. Like it'd be one thing if I walked in and someone diddling my kid, I'm probably gonna kill you. But now,
I don't have a problem with that either.
No,
if you're fucking somebody's kid, and I have no problem planning out your murder. I'm down with that. I'm fine with that. It's just you need to be more careful so that you don't get caught in doing it.
Yeah, no, get me wrong. I'm sympathetic with both examples. I'm just saying from a getting away with it type thing, you'd have a much better defense in the eyes of the state if you walked in on it than after the fact you hunt them down. Like, don't get me wrong, I think both are perfectly fine. But like
now, really, the best way to do it is to get yourself a badge, join the police department, and then you just murder at will, and you don't get charged with anything. It's a win-win.
Yeah, I mean, another example I typically use is the idea of like a cop. If they pull you over, I do like, and it's say they're hassling you and you haven't done anything wrong. I think you're perfectly within your rights, or morally speaking, to defend yourself in whatever way you see fit. But that's not going to work out well for you. So, like, it may not be the smart thing to do.
Right, exactly. This is what I say with the sovereign citizens. It's like you guys are completely justified in refusing to like show your license, and I get it's self-defense, but shooting state troopers on the side of the road is not a good way to have a long life expectancy. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, you only get one life, so like,
right,
sure,
operate in shadows, be smart.
Yeah. All right, what is the global strategy, continental strategy, and local tactics for an NLA optimally to pursue? Again, let's look at the 4 steps from agora, from statism, or from statism to agora. The first 3 are actually rather artificial divisions. No abrupt change occurs from first to second to third. As will be shown, it is most probable the transition from the 3rd to 4th step will be quite sudden, though it is not required by the nature of the agora. Rather, the convulsion will be caused by the nature of the state. In fact, all violence, unrest, instability, and dislocations are caused by the state, never fomented by new libertarians. Heed well, you who would be a paladin of liberty. Never initiate any act of violence, regardless of how likely a libertarian result may appear.
That's key.
Yes, I like that, because that is one thing I've heard, especially in the past like year or so. There have been people who've made cases that like, well, maybe we have to do this or that. And I don't even necessarily mean like libertarians, especially. I'm trying to think of an example. I can't think of one right now, but I've heard other people make cases that like, well, maybe we have to do some bad shit to get to where we want. It's like, well, that's likely not going to end up well. Like,
right,
especially
right where we are now.
Yeah. Especially when we're talking about a large organization. It's one thing as an individual to do something bad. The ends means not completely matching up. Like, I still think it probably won't work out well for you, but now when you're talking about something that's like going from like it's a social thing with multiple people, like it's going to probably multiple generations thing. Like it's probably more of like a paleo thing. The idea that like kind of the idea basically.
Well, I think also like the Boogaloo Boys, right? Who like they want to like go start a war with the government, and like they get so mad at me when I say like that's not going to work out well. Like you're not going to get very far when you do that shit. You're sort of initiatory violence just reduces libertarians to the same level as like political trash. So why would we want to do that to ourselves? Why our goal is to rise above that, not to like get down on the floor with them.
Oh, I know what I was thinking of, because there's been a big talk a while back of like the NAP and how like maybe sometimes we shouldn't follow the NAP. And it's like, especially at a movement level. If you're talking about, it's one thing if you're talking about as an individual, sure, maybe you can make some sort of justification that on your individual level, this is wrong, but I'm doing it and I'll correct later. But now if you're talking about something, I still think that's probably not going to work out. But even then, there's some case to be made. But now if you're talking about something that's like a movement, and especially one that's going to be probably multiple generations, it's like, okay, but there are other people who are taking cues from your actions and interpret things certain ways. You're not going to be able to pass on your thinking of like, well, we just did this bad thing once and now it'll work out. Some people took the message from that of like, well, it's okay to do bad things and it'll end up all right.
I really think like going back to what Conkin said before, you have to sort of lead by example, and like, you have to sort of live a life that's consistent with the principles you believe in. And then other people will see how that's like successful, and they'll try to adopt those principles as well. And that's the only way that we spread these ideas.
Yeah, and that in some regards does kind of apply to like utilizing like political parties and stuff like that. And it's not to say you don't ever, because the idea that I'm getting at is the argument I usually make is that like, okay, cool, maybe you make some sort of short win here and there, but you've also shown people that this is a route to utilize. And if you look at the overarching, like how this has worked out, it hasn't worked out well. And at some point, your group or you or whoever is making these theoretical positive changes is not going to be there. And all you've done is create this social impact of telling other people this is the way to go. And now they're engaged in this thing that isn't doing the things you want them to do in the future. So
then that's frankly a best case scenario for them, right? That they can actually convince people to like even agree with their ideas.
Yes. Yeah, that's the biggest argument I make for like the LPMC. It's like, well, what happens when you aren't there? Like at some point, someone else is going to be controlling this organization, and you've built it up in the meantime. So
yeah. All the resources they put together are just going to be lined up for the next Nick Sarwark. That's actually a good point that I haven't even thrown at them yet. I'll have to stick that in my ammo bag.
That's my main argumentation. But to do so is to reduce yourself to a status. There are no exceptions to this rule. Either you are fundamentally consistent or you are not. A new libertarian is fundamentally consistent, and one who is not fundamentally consistent is not a new libertarian. To be clear, I feel like we said this before, but for those who popped in, new libertarian is what he's using to refer to like Agorist, basically, is kind of what he's getting at. Using new libertarian analysis, however, one can predict the likely outbreak of statist aggression and move to head it off by exposure or even defend or evacuate the victims. One can also predict the probable outcomes of deviations by libertarian groups and either head off the sellouts and disasters or win respect for one's foresight and that of new libertarianism from potential recruits. Let the state be the forest fire. The NLA are the smoke eaters who know how it burns, how to fire break, how the winds of change affect it, to where the sparks may fly, and finally, how to extinguish it. With this in mind, let us label the steps to Agora as 4 stages and phases and outline the appropriate strategies for each. Thank you, Outlaw Barber. I did get a haircut, and it does look nice. All right. By the way, I don't. We're definitely not gonna be able to finish this chapter today, since you got to be out in like 20 minutes. But that works out because the next chapter is really short.
And we only have like 7 pages. We won't be able to do it.
We'll see. Phase 0, zero density agorist society. In this phase, most of human history, no agorists exist. Only scoured libertarians or proto-libertarian thinkers and practicing counter-economists. Economists. That word always trips me up. The moment someone reads this manifesto and wishes to apply it, we have moved to the next phase. All that can be done in phase 0 is slow evolution of consciousness, hit or miss development, and a lot of frustrating dichotomies. Until you, the first agorist in a phase 0 situation, have added to your number, your only strategy can be to increase your numbers as well as live counter-economically yourself. The best form of organization is a libertarian alliance in which you steer the members from political activity, where they have blindly gone seeking relief from oppression, and focus on education, publicity, recruitment, and perhaps some anti-political campaigning. These vote for nobody, none of the above, boycott the ballot, don't vote, it only encourages them, etc. Well, that's a good point. I think didn't Konkin make some moves for that before with having movements for vote for nobody. So that would be like,
he came up with that. That's his slogan.
Yeah, which
he was a big supporter when Walter Block ran back in the day when he was in New York. He ran for New York State Assembly under the slogan "Block for Disassembly," and Konkin was a major supporter of his. And actually, I sell that shirt at Agora Threads.
Yeah. None of the above. That's kind of funny because it's a libertarian thing.
Yeah.
Which I guess that's one way you could make a case for the people in the LP is if they ran on some shit like that, but they're not going to. So.
Yeah.
But to publicize the libertarian alternative, an LA may take stands on issues agreed on, but insist on unanimity. Only the most clearly libertarian stands will be taken, and you can always veto a deviationist stance. Always encourage tendencies towards hardcore, consistent positions and scorn softcore, inconsistent ones. I do think it's funny. I mean, I feel like we probably hammered this already, that they always give a shit about like being the most consistent, but like if you're talking about theory or consistency,
that's good.
Kind of like, yeah, that's kind of the like I know it's like, oh, you're pure, but it's kind of like, okay, well, that's like, if we're talking, if you're just like, if you're saying we're the most consistent and most pure, all you're doing is admitting that our theory is better in some sense.
Yes.
Like otherwise, which I mean, they wouldn't say that, but it's like, okay, well then don't use that argument. Like don't use that like ad hominem or whatever you want it to be. Like, because all like, you're doing is saying that we're right. Because if your theory is correct, then being consistent is the way to go. Like,
I know, and it's like when we were talking with Dave, like I said to him, I was like, look, I don't have like a concrete 2 + 2 = 4 like sort of proof, but like the fact that we are the most consistent sort of is like an indicator. It's a pretty strong indicator that we're barking up the right tree. You know what I mean? It's like, like you wouldn't accept the logically inconsistent theory of chemistry or of like any of the natural sciences. So why would you accept a logically inconsistent theory of the social sciences, right? Like if your theory is inconsistent, that means that you've made a mistake somewhere, right? Like, so like that should be a big eye opener to other factions of the libertarian community.
Which, to be fair, I think that's more of a commentary on how that is just a throwaway talking point, which I don't know if Dave even made that point. Maybe he did. But that is one thing I think people should stop doing, because anyone who thinks like a second can realize, like, and understands what theory is, should realize that all that is essentially is a concession that you are in some way right. Although, don't get me wrong, I think like if we like say had we pressed Dave on that, like giving people shit about being the most, which I don't know if he said that for one.
I don't think he did bring it up.
Yeah.
But like,
okay, but I know that's a common talking point.
Yeah, and a lot of people are like, oh, you're going to be the most consistent person online at the boxcar. And I'm like, well, if you're on the boxcar, then your theory was inconsistent. right?
Yeah.
Then there was some sort of inconsistency there that screwed your theory up. We're going to be the guys who aren't on the boxcar. You know what I mean? So it's
and
like,
if we are on the boxcar, it's like, well, okay, we fucked up somewhere. And then your whole talking point of us being the most pure, most consistent was bunk. So it's one or the other.
I'm never going the boxcar. I'm never going the boxcar. I'll never be there.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's more of just a commentary on pick one. Either we're the most consistent, or stop using that talking point, because I hate that so much. Because everyone it's like this ad hominem where it's like, okay, if you really think about this, you're the retard here. Like, if that's your talking point, like, because you're saying like, oh, you're so consistent in your theory, and like, okay, well, are you arguing my theory is wrong?
Like, it doesn't make any sense. You're right.
Like a good theory works in practice. So if you're agreeing my theory is correct and I'm consistent, then like,
thank you.
Thanks. Like, all right. Low density agorist society. The first economic libertarians appear in this phase, and the first serious splits in the libertarian movement occur. Since few libertarians are very consistent, yet deviationism will run rife and tend to overwhelm activism. Get liberty quick schemes from anarcho-Zionism, running way to a promised land of liberty, which we didn't ever touch on that. I thought we might have touched on that at some point, which I don't know if we've done in this series yet. But like, I kind of like the spirit, but I don't think the idea is complete, because I do like the idea of like moving or obviously within your subjective values, kind of sort of migrating to what extent you can to spots that are more amenable to your ideas or values or what you can. But now, like, one centralized location, no, that seems to be a way for shit to go bad. Which, so I guess maybe that's me being diplomatic. When the Free Staters go on, I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, sure, have your New Hampshire, but also I think we should have our Florida. I also think we should have people moving to different areas. I do think we should set up some sort of loose network, but not one fucking spot.
Look, you have an obligation to yourself to, if you can move from a place that's very oppressive to a place that's less oppressive, you should do that for yourself. But don't be confused. You're not going to help bring about an end to the state by doing that. Like, the only way to do that is through counter-economic activity, by engaging the black and gray markets.
Although I would make the case that makes it a little bit easier to do so, because and that kind of naturally creates this it's these incentives that creates this natural network once that starts to occur. It's almost like this underground railroad of agorists,
right? Yeah. And that's sort of what's happening in like places like New Hampshire. Like, there's a lot of cryptocurrency adoption there right now, precisely because there's a big number of agorists and crypto anarchists and libertarians and stuff. But at the same time, if it ever gets big enough, is it really in our interest to have all the libertarians in one spot for the state? Could you imagine if all of the Ukrainians got together in like one stadium for Putin? Would that work out very well? Like, no. Why would you want to concentrate yourself in large numbers for the enemy? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I do think there should be some level of concentration, but not a singular centralized location.
In Konkin says about this in another place, he says, he quotes Shakespeare, who says, "Sometimes, dear Brutus, we cannot look to the stars, but we must look to ourselves." And it's so true if you think about it. It's like, stop looking for like these answers in all these crazy places. Like, it's in you, right? Like, liberty is something that resides in all of us. It's just waiting for you to claim it, right? It's not something that another man can give you or that you can find by moving geographically. It's something inherent that's within all of us.
Yeah. All right. To political opportunism will seduce the impatient and sway the incompletely informed. All will fail if for no other reason that liberty grows individual by individual. Mass conversion is impossible. There is one exception: radicalization caused by status attack against a collective. I do like the mass conversion is impossible, because that kind of touches on a point I've been trying to get at a lot. A lot of people will make the case that like, oh, well, the whole state's not just going to be Agora. Like, I think people have this conception that like the Agora will just take over the whole United States. Like, they're still stuck in this like status paradigm of like the whole state. And it's like, if we can just carve out areas, bubbles of liberty, or, and like, yeah, sure, that will take over states over time. And theoretically, generations or thousands of years from now, maybe it'll carve out the whole world. But the idea that it's like, because people look at it that like, oh, we're going to take over the whole fucking United States. Like, even if it's like a couple states or a state or a fucking county or whatever, you know what I mean?
Well, like, this is like something that I tell the educationalists, is what I call them, the people who tell me, well, look, the Libertarian Party, Sal, it's not about political power, it's about education. But really, this is an educational institution. We're just trying to educate people. And I try to tell them, like, what's more utopian, that we can have an agorist society, or that you're going to convince everybody to be Rothbardian libertarians, right? Like, the latter is like extremely utopian. It's like absurdly utopian. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry, but you're not going to convince the whole world to convert to like Rothbardian libertarianism. It's just not going to happen. It's much more likely that people engage in the agora by virtue of their own financial or economic incentive.
Yeah, which I mean, even in the pure agora, in this magical world, probably thousands or hundreds of years from now, if we ever get to that point, it will be like, yeah, maybe you do have a handful of people who are philosophically agorist, but there's gonna be a lot of people just operating within their incentives and just kind of going along to get along.
Like, the majority of people who are in crypto, for example, they don't know Austrian business cycle theory. They just want to get rich. They're just hoping they get rich. You know what I mean? It's like, they're not in it for theory. They're in it for themselves and for their own economic well-being. And that's the whole key of agorism. That's why agorism and entrepreneurship are married so closely.
All right. Even so, it requires entrepreneurs of liberty to have sufficiently informed the persecuted collective so that they lace coherently libertarian ward rather than scatter randomly or worse, flow into out of power statism. These crises of statism are spontaneous and predictable, but cannot be caused by moral, consistent libertarians. The strategy of the first new libertarians is to combat the anti-principles that strengthen the state and uselessly dissipate anarchist energy. The general strategy outlined previously applies. Get libertarians into counter-economics and persuade the most active of the agorists to get counter-economists into libertarianism. The proto-new libertarians may work within existing organizations and clubs of libertarians as radical caucuses, ginger groups, or as a libertarian left faction in general. And NLA is a premature here because it is not yet self-sustaining. Radical caucuses. I'm trying to...
So two things on this real quick. He says, persuade the most active of agorists to get counter-economists into libertarianism. So it's not just about converting ANCAPs into agorists. It's about converting your street criminal friends to agorism, and like that kid who you're selling weed with, like, explain to him how he's being screwed, right? Because he's just as likely to adopt these principles as an ANCAP is. The second thing he says here of interest is this whole radical caucuses thing. Konkin was not opposed to using the Libertarian Party's caucuses. He even has a paper like from the 70s called like the caucus strategy. But what's important to understand is he doesn't want to use these caucuses to take over the LP or to gain any sort of elected office. The whole point is to like go in there, go to these radical caucuses, find the most radical members, and be like, "Hey, you need to come with us." To Konkin, it's more of a search and rescue mission than anything else. That's what his caucus strategy is about.
Well, shit, dog. We need to start a caucus.
Yeah,
I didn't see you at the LP convention. I was there.
The Rescue and Recovery Caucus. Yeah. We're only in it to like get you guys out of here.
Yeah,
you know what
I mean?
All
we need is a group of people who don't care about all that gay shit that they do, the voting and stuff, and just come in there and drink and hang out, and that's all it is.
Just make a mockery out of the whole situation.
Yeah, that's what I did. So many people are like, "Oh, are you there to do? Are you part of the party now?" Like, no. I'm just here to drink with my homies.
Of that?
No, not. I think I got like one or two kind of jokingly, but I'm like, no, I'm just here to hang out with my homies. So
I can only imagine. I feel like if I was there, there'd be like pictures on the internet. They'd be like, look where Sal was. And
we're creating our radical caucus. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
A radical caucus is the guys who drink and smoke weed and hang out with them and, tell them what they're doing is gay.
On the convention floor, right?
Yeah. What can be successfully built is, under whatever label means most conducive to recruitment, a movement to the libertarian left. Such a movement is itself a mixed bag of individuals of varying hardness of core, but they are tending or moving toward the ideal of new libertarianism. Even within MLL, a movement of the libertarian left, structure should be de-emphasized. The most new libertarian will be the most competent to coordinate and plan. That is, those of highest understanding and practice of agorism and greatest zeal for action will naturally direct resources. Each MLLer, I think we talked in this in the previous one. I hate how he does this shit. Like each NLLI spends his or her own resources and decide whether or not to accept a tactician's or strategist's advice and planning, as any entrepreneur would do with any informed consultant. Some pseudo-political public trappings may be necessary to utilize public forums and media access. Also, most people will not understand your market organization unless you translate it into pseudo-political terminology and back again. At this point in the latter stages of phase 1, and with a functioning MLL large enough, these hardcore dedicated cadre can actually apply leverage to sway larger groups of semi-converted quasi-libertarians to block marginal actions by the state. This is a high expenditure, quick again, but low long-range yield tactic and should be rare. It will be covered later. Basically, stave off war and mass extermination of libertarians. Following all these activities, radicalizing the libertarians and evolving the NLA, that is all one can accomplish. All right, I know you have a hard out in like 5 minutes, so I feel like that's probably a good spot to quit.
Yeah.
And we'll bounce. But the big takeaway I think I got from this one is me and you need to get some more agorists together when we start going to these libertarian events. That's what we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, honestly, you know what I've been meaning to do is, like, for so long, is to put together like a sort of like a Tampa Bay Agorist sort of meetup. Just in like the area. It's something we'll have to get together and we'll have to work on one of these days.
Yeah, I'm definitely down. That would be fun. For sure. Yeah. And we need to start going to all the libertarian stuff. You know, I think there'll be more. I don't know when the next thing will be, but there'll be more. And they're fun. Don't get me wrong. I had a blast at the libertarian at the convention this last weekend. I had a lot of fun. Hung out with Dave Smith, did all sorts of shit. Hang out with all the homies. I didn't do any gay politics stuff at all. So, you know,
no votes, no nothing. Good.
No nothing. If anything, I teased them a little bit, and it was fun. With that, I guess you want to go ahead and drop your plugs, or if you have any other thoughts before we bounce.
Yeah. The book Anti-Politics. Check it out. It's on Amazon. If you prefer to pay with crypto, you can shoot me a DM on Twitter or social media. Other than that, 3dprintergober.com for 3D printers and supplies. You can use crypto to avoid having to access KYC payment platforms, and agorathreads.com for libertarian, anarchist, and agorist apparel.
Awesome. With that I have, this is the No Way Jose YouTube channel, or this No Way Jose show. You can find me on YouTube, all the major audio podcatchers, Odyssey as well. Follow me on Twitter at 2020 No Way Jose. If you want to give me money, I like money. Give me that. Patreon.com, so it's No Way Jose 2020. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And with that, we're out. Thank you again, Sal. We'll be back. I feel like we'll probably finish the book on the next one, but we may hit up critiques after that because
we should. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. Appreciate it, man. All right. With that, we are out.